Hey guys, we're here at the Drum Department TV station, the same place we were with Gavin Harrison. Today we have Jojo Mayo with us. Welcome.
Hello.
We're glad to have you here, Jojo. How are you feeling?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Jojo, what are you doing at the moment? What's this tour about?
I've been in Europe for about a month now. I did a little clinic tour in Italy that I've been touring with my own band, with my band Nerve, doing a couple of dates for about 2 weeks around Europe. And now I played at the Messe 2 days ago. I'm just concluding with an additional 3 clinic dates in Germany, and then I'm going back home.
Great. What's touring with Nerve like? Fun? Stress?
Say that again?
What's touring with Nerve like? Is it fun for you to tour with these guys?
Oh yeah, of course, because it's, it's a platform where I can express myself really the way ultimately I want to express myself. That's like, I've been working for many years to establish that platform where I am the boss. So artistically it is great. However, I'm also the band leader, so I'm responsible for the guys in my band. So there's a lot of things that I have to do, and it's not like, I play in a band, someone tells me, okay, you got to get up tomorrow at, 7 o'clock to go to the plane. It's like, I have to make sure everybody knows that, So being a band leader is a little bit of more extra pressure. You're a little bit more exposed, people want to talk to you, and, so to deal with that, I'm getting better at it. So it's more pressure. I mean, this particular tour was just physically very, very, very demanding because it was all with planes, and if you do that, sometimes, you only get like 4 hours of sleep, you get home after the gig, even if you're very disciplined, you don't have a glass of wine, you pack up your stuff, you go to the hotel, you sleep, the alarm clock is going to go off at 4:30 in the morning, your lobby call at 5, you have to get that early flight from Istanbul to Oslo at 7 o'clock in the morning. So you do that for a couple of days, and you sign some autographs with like a t-shirt which is a little bit wet after the show, boom, you're going to get sick, so you have to be careful. So this is a hard thing sometimes to do, to tour like that. But other than that, it's great, pretty much everywhere we went, like the places are sold out now, so it seems to be, it's critical mass. I think we're just about, that wave is just about to collapse, and, we're just about to break into more of like, not a mainstream acceptance, but, just like a platform where this band can exist economically, without me having to do anything else but that,
So you're actually also the tour manager?
No, not really, but, it's kind of like, those things bleed in at that point right now, because we're not at a, when we do van tours, then I have a tour manager, but when we do plane tours, it's differently, So I somehow do stuff, for like certain legs of the tour, the booking agent travels with us. Some of the stuff I'm on my own.
Since I first heard Nerve, I thought I never heard something like that. I mean, I heard already these electrical sounds, these programmed sounds before, but never being played like that from a real drummer, from real musicians. And you always play on a live basis. You never do something with overdubs, I think. Yeah. How did this idea come up?
Oh, okay, well, you're setting me up for somewhat like a long answer here.
That's
right?
Okay.
Well, one of the things, I always expose myself. My heroes, the people that did things that I, was looking up to. Let's talk about the drummers, okay? Not like, let's not talk about Andy Warhol or, or Leonardo da Vinci or other people that I learned important things, or Zaha Hadid, or, let's talk about drummers. You know?
Okay.
So the drummers that inspired me were all innovators. You know, somehow they all came out of the tradition and broke with the tradition, and drummers really the drums in the Western world has really not does not have a very important role. That's only started about 100 years ago with jazz, really, you know, with Louis Armstrong and that. And so, you know, like we're thousands of years behind India and Asia, and, you know, like they have a much more higher developed rhythmical vocabulary than we do. However, make a long story a little bit shorter, for the past 20 or 30 years, drummers have not made any contributions to rhythm culture. Zero. Like, I think the last original concept that was provided by a drummer that entered the mainstream was a blast beat. And that's like 25 years ago.
Okay.
So drummers have been practicing to play the clave with the left foot. They've been practicing flam rudiments with the double bass drum pedal. They've been practicing a lot of things which is hard to do, but somehow useless, you know, in a cultural, you know, culturally speaking, not the discipline of drumming.
Good for itself.
Culturally speaking, okay? So while drummers, when, you know, to practice extreme independence, and they were busy doing that, producers and DJs started to create new forms of rhythmical culture. So it's not like John Bonham or Stuart Copeland that starts to play things that influence the music, but now it's a producer like Timbaland or the Neptunes, or it's those type of people that create the new ideas, glitch beats, you know, all that stuff. You know, what Shafiq Hussein or like Bilal is doing. You know, it's all comes from like DJs and not from drummers anymore. Now, or like producers. Now, a lot of those producers used to be drummers. You know, so they have a strong connection to that. And I got together with electronic music because I'm a producer also. I mean, people here know me as a drummer, but you know, I've been producing. And some sort of my income came from like production. So I always played with machines, and I always like hip hop, and always like those things. So I always followed electronic music. And the breaking point for me with electronic music was when I was touring with a hip hop artist in 1994 with Michelle Indeggiocello.
Okay.
And I was just doing her first big European tour, and we were in Glastonbury at a festival in UK, and we had a day off. And at that day off, I went to one of those parties, and they had like an electro party, and they had one tent. There was about 800 people where they played old school drum and bass.
Yeah.
You know, and I heard that music before. You know, like it might be 1 or 2 years before, and I thought, oh, this is kind of cool, and I didn't really could make much sense of it, but culturally I understood. Wow. There's people dancing there's 800 people dancing to rhythms that sound like Tony Williams' Lifetime. It's not like but I was like, okay, well, I cannot afford to ignore this. I cannot afford to ignore this. This is some highly developed communication rhythm language. So I thought, why is there no drummer playing that stuff? So simply plain and simple, I loved it, I liked the beats, so I went back and practiced that, and I was trying to put a band together, and it was impossible because musicians were completely segregated from electronic culture. They didn't know. Like, you know, when I talked to someone like, you know, I talked to Rodney Holmes, said, well, yeah, I want to get into drum and bass. So what, you mean a band, just a drummer and the bass player? You know, like, no, the only guy in New York City, the only two musicians that knew about what I was talking about were Zach Danziger and Tim LaFay. Was the only guys that knew what I was talking about when I talk about, you know, when I talk about Aphex Twin, or I talk about Utrecht, or I talk about Photech or Square Pusher. Well, everybody knew the Chemical Brothers at that point, you know, or everybody knew like you know, bands like Prodigy, you know, because they had radio hits. But the real underground was hidden from like. So I started to create some sort of like a experimental platform, and I started to become a promoter of events. I became a party promoter to create a platform where my music could exist. And the name of that party was Prohibited Beats.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we started that, and it's after about 2 months, you know, Playboy magazine wanted an interview. After 3 months, we were in like New York Times. And you know what? The musicians, it was like 1 year before I actually saw a musician in there. You know, like Lenny Kravitz came like, you know, and like Kate Moss came 6 months before Randy Brecker showed up. And Randy Brecker comes in because he heard, oh, there's some shit going on there. Well, maybe we should check it out. It was too loud, so like he didn't really stay for like a long time. But just to say, like, there was all art students, you know, and you know, it was like a very eclectic environment where I could build that. So it was a very liberating experience for me because I could do something that nobody else did.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, and nobody told me like, oh, this is jazz, you gotta play like this. Right. Oh no, this is metal, you gotta play like this, and this is whatever, this is that, and you gotta this. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. So I could have any hairstyle that I wanted. I could play a 24-inch bass drum or an 18-inch bass drum. I could use a big cymbal, a small cymbal, no cymbals. I could do whatever the fuck I wanted, and as long as people danced, everything was cool.
Yeah.
So I experienced a big liberating process in like the music, and it didn't always sound good. It took a while till we got a formula to make this thing work. However, the bottom line is, to conclude this very big thing, and I apologize for that, but
no problem.
I mean, I could go on for like a long time about it, but you know, trying to consolidate this. It's a big misunderstanding that people think that I'm trying to play like a machine, because I never try to play like a machine for 2 reasons. Number one, I cannot play like a machine because I'm a human being.
Right.
Number two, I'm not supposed to play like a machine because I'm a human being. We invented machines to do the dirty work so we can have an espresso while the machine does the shit so we don't have to do it, you know?
Right.
Now we become more machine-like, you know, like, you know, we don't leave the house without our iPhone. We can't remember anything. We can't remember a phone number. We can't do, everything is, the protocol is we become more machine-like. So what I'm trying to do by playing cybernetic music is 2 things. I want to expose the process of making music, which is improvisation, which is that drum set came with jazz, and jazz to me is 2 things. Jazz to me is improvisation and rhythmic momentum. Yeah. Right? Bring those things 2 together with a texture which is contemporary. So I can build a little bit of an arc where I can put some of the knowledge of like Max Roach or, you know, Zigaboo Modelist or whoever it is, and expose it to an audience that has no access to the process of creating live music. The closest that they get is Guitar Hero, you know what I'm saying? So basically, cybernetic music is binary culture. Everything is based on 0 and 1. Yeah. Okay, so it's yes or no.
Right.
And with that concept, the machines will always excel over human beings. They'll always be more effective. However, we have a ratio, we have something between 0 and 1, or yes and no. We also have maybe. And the maybe thing, that aspect is very, very important, you know, like, and I think in this time it's very important to demonstrate that there's something that a machine cannot do yet. Yeah. Now, by playing a shuffle beat or playing anything, any blues or jazz or rock, I will not be able to demonstrate it because it's like a green dot in front of a green background is invisible. a green dot in front of a red background is very, so I choose electronic music, and the closer I play those beats the way they are, the more apparent it becomes the difference of a human being reproducing those beats than a machine. So I'm basically doing the opposite of people expect me to do. I'm actually trying to bring the experience of music creation to them in real time, you know.
Perhaps the misunderstanding evolved because the idea of the sound came from a machine. I mean, a human programmed it, right? But the first result was a very technical sounding thing.
I don't think anything is technical sounding. I think that's just interpretation.
Okay.
You know, you can have a beatboxer that does something that is technical sounding. There's a lot of drummers that do drum clinics which are extremely technical sounding.
Right.
You know, I think it's not that. It's like either you have a purpose behind your expression or you don't. When you don't have a purpose behind your expression, then it will be technical sounding. Doesn't matter if it comes from a machine or from a drum kit. I think, you know.
Okay.
There's you know, like the new Jimi Hendrix, you know, you will not find the new Jimi Hendrix behind the guitar. The new Jimi Hendrix is probably like Banksy is the new Jimi Hendrix. That's for me very clear, you know. When I saw that stuff was like, wow, Banksy is the new Jimi Hendrix. It's not a guy in music, you know. There will be no John Bonhams anymore. It's over. We don't need that anymore. You know, there will be no Steve Gadd anymore. There will be no Tony Williams anymore because we don't require it anymore. The time moves on. The paradigm has like changed. You know. Now we have to bring communication to the people, and rhythm is communication. That's the most important thing for a drummer, to know how to communicate with this. That's why drums were invented as communication instruments. Boom, 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 boom. It means something. It means something else, and boom, 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 boom. That means rain. That means sunshine. This means war. This means wedding. You know, the rudiments, the same thing. They were signals. Very strong communicative things. It's very unfortunate to see there's not a lot of drummers who are aware of that communication is such an integral part of our instruments, you know. And there's a lot of drum set players, but you know how many housewives own a djembe because they understand the communication, because the djembe is all communication rhythms, you know. So I'm saying that's my job, you know. My job really, it's not to prove that I can do something which is hard to do, number one. My job is to change people's lives, to become less machine-like, to become more thinking individuals, and to communicate to them my ideals, you know, and what I learn, what I like about rock and roll, and what I like about jazz. You can't find rock and roll in rock anymore. You can't find jazz in jazz. You know what I'm saying? If you buy something that says jazz in it, I can't find any jazz in it anymore. You know, I find more jazz in something like you know, Shafiq Hussein than like any jazz band. You know, like I can't find any. You know, I find more rock in Jack White than like in any prog rock band. You know, Jack White is a bad boy. I think that guy's pretty good. You know. I like the White Stripes, you know. There's not a lot of drummers that can do what like Meg White does. You know, she's technically not very good, but it kind of works.
But she hits.
I mean, I don't know if she plays the records or if Jack does it, but it's a new paradigm, you know. Rock and roll is about something. Rock and roll is about like disagreement with the authority. You know. Like, you know, saying, you know, not rock and roll is not about not just exclamation points; it's question marks. You know?
Okay. In an interview I saw with you, you said you like to be where the sparks are still hot.
What?
Where the sparks are still hot. So where the things are new and fresh. So, is there perhaps a new spark?
Well,
already?
yeah, I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm not a psychic, you know. I don't know, I cannot foretell the future. But let's say, you know, if I want to buy bread, then I'm going to go to a bakery and not a butcher shop. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I know most likely in jazz, nothing exciting is going to happen. There's always, there's always exceptions to the rule. You know. So I'm trying to find the places where I think there is an atmosphere which is charged. You know, kind of like when there's going to be a thunderstorm. You know, you can, you know, the clouds are kind of coming, and you know, like, well, maybe in a half hour, I have a half hour. It's going to start. You know, I'm culturally, I'm looking for those type of situations. You know, that's also why I'm with my band. We're, you know, on this tour we played in Bucharest, you know, and like in the Tbilisi. I would like to go to different parts of the world, you know, and see what's going on and how people understand that, you know, not just look from one paradigm, which is our Western world with our problems, you know. And this is the great thing about music, the opportunity to, you know, to go everywhere, you know, to South America or India or Japan or Indonesia and America, Canada, blah, 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 Europe. And see all these different mindsets.
Well, a concert of Nerve is also a bit like an evolving hurricane, because you do not exactly know what will happen, because you always improvise. Is that true? And there's also a word that came up when I read the whole thing that was reverse engineering.
Right.
Could you say something about that?
All right. Well, reverse engineering is just like, you know, it's like a term to help people understand what I do. Because unfortunately, you know, with anything which is new, you know, people have a hard time to comprehend it. So you have to build certain bridges. Reverse engineering basically is a term that comes out of, you know, engineering from cars or computers. Reverse engineering is almost plagiarism, but it's not. It's like this. Reverse engineering, let's say like Mercedes is built a car, okay? And BMW, and it's a very successful car, and BMW is threatened by that concept. So they go like, we need to do something like that. But we cannot steal it, otherwise it's a copyright infringement. So what they would do is some engineers would buy a Mercedes, take it apart, understand how it works, and then it would gather a team and say, okay, build a motor, but don't do this. You know, like they give them riddles, not the solutions. So if they're able to build a motor without ever having seen the original motor, that's what you call reverse engineering, right? So it's kind of like you make a copy, but you don't. So I do the same thing with like an electronic sounds. And I hear something goes like, and you're like, well, how can I create that sound in real time on the drum set? So I have to start to be like creative and go like, okay, let me put a splash cymbal on my snare. Well, the 8-inch splash cymbal is not good because it sounds more like an ashtray. Maybe I use an ashtray that sounds more like a cymbal. So maybe I use a different stick. So I experiment with those textures. You know, maybe I have to play really light, you know, like just like tune the snare drum really low and put something underneath the snares. So when I go like, it actually sounds like that. So that's how I reverse engineer those sounds, because I know an electronic hand clap is just a flam of like two very high-pitched white noise sounds. I mean, the hand clap sound that we know from drum machines is not an actual hand clap, you know. It's like two consolidated noise sounds that go like black. So I know I just have to use a flam to do that. You know?
Yeah. So your audio engineer on stage is actually the fourth part of the band.
Yeah, Rolly Mosimon. Rolly is also a drummer. He's originally Swiss. I know Rolly for like 30 years. Rolly is a very good drummer, and he moved to America about 30 years ago. And this is a guy, you know, that knows everything from John Coltrane to the Beatles, you know. You can give him a chart, he can play in a big band, you know. He's a really good drummer. But he went to New York and he couldn't have a career as a drummer. Like he realized he was not good enough as a jazz guy, you know. So he started to play with punk bands, so he became the drummer with the Swans. So anyway, and I known Rolly, and I met Rolly again. It was like, well, I know this guy. I said, yeah, well, I know you guys when you were 12, playing in Zurich. So we became friends, you know. And we started working together. And at some point, I asked him, would you like to do sound at my party and just try some new things, you know, and interact with the band? And he was really into it, you know. So it kind of came together, you know.
So, if I get the picture right, he hears what you're playing on stage.
Yeah.
And he perhaps says, oh, well, a reverb would do it, and gives you reverb.
Yeah.
And suddenly you hear, oh, I got reverb.
Oh, he screws around with myself all the time, you know.
Okay.
I mean, some of the reverbs I do myself, but he can take my reverb out and replace it, you know. And so he does the thing with the whole band, you know, like, you know, he knows, like, okay, like, you know, the bass lays out, and he knows the bass is going to come in like 8 bars, so he sets up some super low end, you know, and he understands that sound is really air moving in one direction, you know. So this guy has a talent for the psycho effects of frequencies, you know.
Okay.
That's why he's great for this band, you know. And he's an improviser too. So he uses the desk as a musical instrument. It's just, unfortunately, he cannot be on stage with us. He has to be in the house because he produces what people hear.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Jojo, you were originally born in Zurich, in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But you chose to live in New York one day.
Yeah, in a nutshell, yes. Yeah. Well, I was born in Switzerland, but my parents lived in Rome.
Ah, okay.
My mom just came to Swiss. I mean, my parents are Swiss. She came to give birth in a Swiss hospital because she felt more safe.
Oh.
And I didn't live in Switzerland up until the time where I had to go to school. Because my family moved to the Far East. I grew up in Hong Kong. And we came back when I was like 5 or 6. So I went to school in Switzerland. And when I was like 18 or 20, I started to tour. And I lived in France for a very short time, you know, and was in Germany for a very short time. And I tried different things. Went to Vienna. And when I was in my mid-20s, you know, I got really frustrated. And I got a little bit scared that, you know, like, I could see that, you know, that somehow I just heard a couple of things too many times, you know. You know, like, you know, when I made a suggestion, like, people were like, yeah, well, you know, well, if it was that easy and everybody would do that, or no, you can't do that. Well, I just heard that too many times.
Yeah.
I heard 2 things too many times. I heard, well, you can't do that. That was one thing that I heard too many times. And the other thing that I heard too many times was like, so what do you do for a living? I'm a musician. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but what do you do during the day? So I understand that, you know, I was going to have a life of misunderstandings. And New York was kind of like an ideal. I mean, I was very naive about it, you know. But a friend of mine, he gave me the opportunity, like a friend of mine that I went to school with, he was in New York, said, hey, you know what? Like, why don't you pussyfoot around? I said, just come to New York for a couple of months and see for it. I was really scared, you know, because I heard all these things like, oh, New York, yeah, you know. That's going to be like a Vinnie Colaiuta type of guy waiting behind every street corner, waiting to, like, you know, blow your lights out, you know. And so anyway, so I went to New York I decided to go there for 3 months and stay with my friend, you know. And about 5 hours after I came to New York, I decided that I was going to come back to live here. You know, it was just like, it was almost like an alien that spent all of his life away from his planet, and then when he was 25, someone took him back to his planet, where he realized, oh, like, everybody here is more like me. I grew up on the wrong planet, you know. I felt at home right away, you know, and it was really magical. Like I was walking around in Tompkins Square Park, and I ran into John Soren, who lives on 7th Street. And he was like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I just went really bluntly and say, "I just moved here." I said, "Oh, that's cool. Are you playing?" So not yet. I just came here like 5 hours ago. And I said, "We want to play a gig tonight?" So okay. So I played my first. I didn't have a pair of drumsticks. I already had a gig, like the first night. So, of course, you know, I was like high, and you know, some of the things were catching up with me, you know, the realities of it, you know. But basically what I did, I went back to Switzerland, and I saved money. I lived really, like, I saved a lot of money. I didn't spend any money, so I saved enough money so I could live in New York for 1 year without having to work a bar job or do anything else, you know. So I did that, you know. I got a situation with a low overhead, which was still possible back then, which is much more difficult right now because New York is extremely expensive. So, and I did that, you know, and just started to do a lot of things that I did not do anymore, you know, like, you know, like standing at the corner of, you know, 49th Street and Broadway at 3 o'clock in the morning while it was snowing with my drum set getting wet, trying to get a cab, and nobody would take me, you know. You know, it's like I thought I was gonna die up there, you know, because it's like, you know, at 10 degrees minus, you know. So I had to pay my dues somehow, but I always had fun, you know. I'm not saying that it was sometimes it was very difficult and very hard, you know. It was not that I was ever, you know, hungry or starving or that, but it was, you deal with frustration trying to get in there and trying to understand what's going on, you know. But eventually, some things, you know, became more clear, and I started to, you know, become more self-confident, and I realized that, you know, I don't have to do what Vinnie Colaiuta does or any other guy to exist. But I realized that I just had to be myself, and I just had to believe in where I felt comfortable, and then everything started to go, like, the doors started to open up pretty quickly, you know.
So you got your first drum kit with the age of 2.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I read
that.
it so.
Yeah, I think the first drum kit was like one of those children's kits. I think I kind of broke it in 20 minutes. and well, I remember my first snare drum was a pearl snare drum, and I got a snare drum and a hi-hat stand. I think it was like 3. And then my first real drum kit I got when I was, I think, 5. And my dad bought it from Kenny Clark. So my father is a musician too, and he used to play with Kenny Clark like in Paris in the late 50s. And Kenny Clark's kit, he must have sold it to like a music store in Zurich. And my dad went into the music store and said, "Hey, this is Kenny Clark's kit. I remember that from Paris." So yeah, so he bought that, and it was an old Sonar. I must have a picture somewhere of that. Anyway, so that was my first drum kit. It was like a 60s Sonar called New Beats thing. It was like, anyway, and I had that kit, and I think when I was 8 or 9, I was starting to get into like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and rock and stuff. You know, like I spray painted the whole kit, like the rims and everything. Spray painted black. and then it was just sitting in the back in the basement of my parents. And 2 years ago, I retrieved it and I donated it to a percussion museum in Budapest called Dub Museum. And those guys restored it. They did a beautiful job. I mean, I have to show you those pictures. It's amazing. It looks better than the day I got it. They replaced missing parts. They hand make missing lugs. Oh. It's wonderful. You can go to Budapest and look at it. Yeah, so he made a little thing, a little shrine with a picture of Kenny Clark and me with the kid. So it's all cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And as I read along, I got the idea that was it always clear for you to become a drummer, a musician, producer?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, because I mean I knew that I could do certain things in the drum particularly well because I could see by the reaction by other people, you know, when I play the drums, like when I, you know, it's an 8-year-old kid sitting in, you know, with Eddie Lockjaw Davis, and you know, could hang, you know, so I understood that there's something special that I could do.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know how to implement it, you know. I didn't know, you know, I only knew about, you know, people tell you, well, the life as a profession is like this, you know, it's very polarized, you know, you see like super success and failure, you know, you don't understand when you're young that there's many possibilities, you know, and I didn't know how to engineer a career, you know, like I auditioned, you know, when I was 14 or I don't know, I was 15, I auditioned for jobs like Pepe Linhardt, you know, like with no idea what I really, just trying what kind of gig could I do or, you know, what I'm supposed to do. So I was very far away from my ideals because you just don't have, you know, this music it's American culture and it lives there. You know, there's an understanding for that, which is very natural. We don't have that here.
Yeah.
You know, like Europeans can't play jazz. There's a certain, you know, there is some, how should I say, there's always exceptions to the rule. But it's like, you know, the same thing is like, you know, Americans don't know how to make a cheese fondue. Or Americans they don't know how to schuhplattern. You know what I'm saying? Of course, you might find a guy that can do it, but you know, there's more to it.
Yeah.
You know, jazz is like, you know, and rock is more British music, I think. To me, rock, although it was invented in America, rock to me is British culture, right? So, but I started to understand certain things about that were very far away from me, you know, like I felt, okay, jazz is a certain discipline where you have to play a certain way. I didn't understand that this is like a way of looking at things, you know.
So it's a cultural
and coming
thing.
to New York, you know, like I started to understand when I looked at the architecture of that city, I started to understand why this music came from that particular place. Because just the rhythm of the way the streets are made, and you go from like, okay, I need to go from Hudson and 6th Avenue. I have to go to 42nd Street and 3rd Avenue. You know, so there's a certain way how you go there. You know, like you go this, and there's not so many possibilities. I mean, there's many possibilities, but you take the one that makes most sense.
Yeah.
It's very rhythmical, rhythmical. The lifestyle and the pace, you know, and the way people walk in New York. It's a little bit faster than other places, you know. So, you know, certain things I started to understand, like on a deeper level, that were very helpful. But when I first started out, you know, it's like, well, people tell you how to do things, and you try to find role models. It's like, okay, this guy's successful. He must be doing something right. So you're trying to do the same thing as that person. Well, maybe what he did was right for him and might not be right for you, you know. So, you know, America was really an opportunity to be more, to find myself and be more authentic, because New York faces you to do that. Because you have no chance trying to become someone else and be successful. Because there's only one guy, and that's it. And you know, you cannot do this. You have to do this. You know, if you're on the knees, you'll be if you decide to be number 2, you will be number 2.
Okay.
So I understood that it was an opportunity not to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
So when your first kit was a Sonor, was it also always clear? It's a dumb question, but always clear to play on Sonor drums?
No, not at all.
Not
no.
at all.
No, I didn't give a rat's ass. You know, that there's so many good drum sets out there. You know, it's just an instrument. But I've been playing Sonor for pretty much like 25 years. And, you know, when I started to get into a certain, when I started to get a certain exposure where drum companies started to notice that you exist, Sonor supported me, you know, and Sonor has always supported me to a degree, you know, where, disregarding if I had a major exposure gig or I was just playing local gigs, I always got support from my Sonor. So for me, now, you know, I mean, every company goes through many, many changes, you know, and sometimes you have to change things because things don't work. But with Fabian and Sonor, I've been for 25 years, and with both companies, I have a very deep relationship, you know, which you can only have if you have a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And at some point, you know, also, I mean, with Sonor, I have to say, Sonor is a company that knows how to make a good drum shell. And that's the most important thing. You know, I mean, the main reason why I would choose to play a certain drum kit is how it sounds.
Right.
You know, because, okay, well, maybe the tom holder is a little bit better here, or a little bit not so good here, or this is very smart, or this is great. But the main thing is the sound. You know, so that's like, you know, that's how I make decisions sonically. And Sonor has always provided me with a certain distinctive, recognizable sound, you know, that I like. You know.
Well, as well as your cymbals from Fabian. Well, how did this work go on? How did you evolve these cymbals with Fabian together? Were you at the point and said, okay, one hammer more there? And
No, it was a long process. You know, it was a really long process. You know, the thing is every drummer, or a lot of drummers, you know, it's like, when it comes to cymbals, how should I say, you know, like the ivory tower of the cymbal, you know, it's easy to find a good hi-hat or a good crash cymbal, but when things start to get like more complex is when you choose a right cymbal. Okay, so now it's especially guys that play more jazz. They're very particular about, you know, because when you play rock, you just need something that projects. But when you spend most of your time developing a sound on the right cymbal. So basically, you know, everybody's romanticizing the vintage Turkish cymbals from the 20s, you know. So basically, I was a Paiste endorser because I'm Swiss, you know. But Paiste didn't have hand-hammered cymbal, and I was looking for that sound. So when Fabian approached me, that was the first company, even before Zildjian, and like other than like, you know, K, that made hand-hammered cymbals. So I was like, okay, I used the opportunity. This is a company that wants to endorse me that makes hand-hammered cymbals. So I was on the lookout for the right cymbal. And I did not really find that. I'll find something which is good for this, but not good for this. Good for this, not good for this. So I just wanted that. So between me and the company, our dialogue went back and forth. You know, they started to send me prototypes. Okay, this is something that Jack DeJohnette had developed, but he doesn't want it. What do you think? You know, so Fabian does a lot of stuff with drummers. They really have their ears on, like, you know, they listen to the opinions, to like what drummers have to say. So they keep sending me this, that. So at some point, I got an Ed Shaughnessy prototype that had a very flat profile, that really had a sound. It was like, you know, not like bing. It's very like, and this is something that I wanted. However, I asked him to send me a blank of that. So they sent me a blank, an unprocessed cymbal. It was very difficult to play, but it had exactly that sound. All right, it was unhammered or like anything. So then what happened, like then Zach Danziger, who played at my party sometimes, you know, like we sometimes did double drum stuff, you know. He saw that and said, "This is very cool. I'm trying to have Siljan to do something like this, but they don't want to do it because they think nobody will buy it."
Okay.
All right. So we talked about this, and I talked about with Fabian. So they started to process some of those symbols like that, and there was something that was kind of like started to resemble a little bit the Fierce Ride, you know. And then like Zach were like, "Well, this is really fucking cool," you know, like that. Yeah. So with Fabian, we kind of stayed at that thing. They just made that symbol for me. That was good. Up until the day where there was ads on the back of Modern Drummer magazine with Zach Danziger with the remix symbols, you know. That day I got a call. I was like, "Hey, can you come up to the factory? Let's look at the symbol idea again," you know. So all of a sudden they were like, "Okay." So me and Mark started to go into that. I said, "Okay, basically what I wanted the feel and the sound of a vintage Turkish cymbal, but with more amplitude." Because Turkish cymbals don't have a lot of amplitude. They're very good with an acoustic bass and like acoustic piano, but with distorted guitar, there's no projection anymore. Yeah. I mean, there's some cymbal that's still good, you know, but most of the time they're not good for that, you know. So that basically was the idea, and we tried, you know, what type of manufacturing thing. That's Mark Love's philosophy. So I just like, no, I want more this. I want it more hot, more cold, more. You know, like the terms, like we started to develop a certain way of talking that maybe for an outside person might totally make no sense. Say, I want the cymbal to sound like, when I play it, I want it to feel like there's a subway train running underneath, like, you know, like something like, I wanted this, you know. And Mark understands that type of terminology, and he knows how to bring it out of a cymbal, you know. So I said, okay, we got to make it a flatter profile, and that brings out more tone projection, like the low end, less mid-range, blah, 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 you know. So then, you know, the cymbal came together, piece by piece, you know, like, we're now making a project, like, I had an idea for a new cymbal, and was going back, we started about a year ago, and we're in the process of consolidating it. It's completely different than, like, the Fierce series, you know, like, which, you know, the Fierce Crash came out of, basically, I wasn't looking for a Fierce Crash, but once we had the manufacturing process that brought out the Fierce Ride, Mark said, okay, I'm going to try this process applied to a crash cymbal. And what came out is like, oh, this is pretty cool. So we started to do that, you know. But anyway, it's very fascinating, and I mean, Mark is a genius, you know, like this guy it's really inspiring to work with those guys, and I really feel fortunate and blessed, you know, to have access to that type of knowledge, you know. It's really amazing, and I start to understand certain things, you know, like just to give you an example, a very short example, when I came to when we had the idea about the basic cymbal, we were going to make the consolidated shape, and to say, okay, let's go to the foundry where they make the, you know, make the metal, and basically the things that are going to turn into cymbals, they look like hockey pucks. They're like little black chunks of metal, and there were about 50 of them on the floor. I said, okay, pick like 10 of those that you like. So I lifted them up and I dropped them to the floor, and it's one like, you know, click, they all sounded different. They all had some sound like a personality. So we made a chart. I said, okay, I want the thing that has the in it, and I want the thing that goes like, and I want the thing that goes like, and they made the symbols out of those. And 2 days later, I recognized every symbol. This had the and this one had. It's really amazing, you know. And then they later on told me that in China, when they made the gongs, you know, there was like with the foundry they put the spirit into the metal, and when a gong cracked, they had to melt it down and make a new one out of that. And usually the soul would travel from one gong into the other one, and if you make another gong out of that, it would sound the same as the other one. Of course, you can change it with hammering, but the personality in the metal it's like a spirit that lives in there, and you cannot get it out. And that was really interesting experience for me, you know, like how something lives in the metal, and you will be able to recognize it even if you change its shape. You know, it's almost like a Buddhistic or a Hinduistic principle of, like, you know, being reborn.
Yeah,
you know?
reincarnation.
So cymbals are very magical instruments, and I love very much for this. You know, and I changed my attitudes towards those instruments.
Looking back the last couple of years, about 10, 20 years, how would you say has the business changed for you? Was there a change in music business?
Totally.
Totally.
Nothing is the same. Everything is different now. Everything is different. So one of the things that I think has drastically changed is the divide of the remnant of the old structure, okay? That has changed the last 10 years. The last 10 years were kind of like culturally the most desolate and awful decade in the past century. It's awful. The last 10 years was George Bush, Paris Hilton doctrine. Just bullshit, you know? You know, we had like, you know, like, that was like American Idol and Superstar and Dieter Bohlen and no talented motherfuckers that are making money.
Okay.
You know, it was the decade of playback and lip syncing and all this bullshit, you know? So the divide now is getting really, really big. Well, I have to say, to be fair to Dieter Bohlen, the thing that he can really do is, like, you know, being a real asshole and, like, you know, and knocking people down. And I have no problem. It's very entertaining. I love to see it, as long as he doesn't fucking sing, you know, because that I cannot, it's embarrassing, you know, and I cannot hear his music or hear him sing. That's really awful. So what he does is actually very professional and very good.
Yeah.
So I don't want to knock that, but it has nothing to do with, like, music, because he's not a musician anyway. And we all know if someone can sing or not. You know, we don't need people like Dieter Bohlen to, like, you know. But anyway,
Tell us,
it's very typical for the past 10 years. So the divide now goes really big. In the middle is nothing. On top, we have toys. We have industry robots, like, you know, like Lady Gaga. You know, Lady Gaga knows exactly which costume design, which designer she wants, which guy to direct the video. But you know, Lady Gaga cannot sing really. You know, neither can she really compose a good song. And when she performs, it's all playback. And I know that because I know the people that work with her. You know, so, or used to work with her. I have to say at that point. Anyway, so we have this device of, like, things which is not really much more different than, like, you know, just really like a complete illusion. It has nothing to do with, you know, what Hendrix or the Beatles brought to the table. You know, it's just like fashion, or, I mean, fashion is interesting, but it's just that, you know. So on the other side, there's the underground, and people going like, okay, let's do what we like. So I think the way the industry is going right now is the only people that are going to have a chance to make a living playing music is the people that do exactly what they believe in. And I'm so serious about that. I'm saying they have to believe in this so much that they're ready to die for it. Because this is what Jim Morrison did, and this is what Hendrix did. I'm not saying that you need to die, you know, but you have to love what you do so much that you go like, you know what, fuck it, you know, we got to play 300 shows and sleep in our car. If you can do this, People will notice you. You're gonna make a living. I'm not saying if you suck, but even if you suck, actually, I think. But if you're good, you're gonna have a future. You're gonna get your audience, and I see how it works. I see how it works. You know, you can do that, or you can become a slave up there. Because I know I'm acquainted with some of the realities, you know, of what you will believe, you know, like some acts, and this is not something that I will reveal in a situation like this, but you just have to trust me. Yeah. Some of the acts that you see on MTV or hear on the radio all the time, and when they play here, they play like in an Olympic stadium, like that the drummer makes like $1,200 a week, you know.
I heard that once before and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, believe me, and you know what? If that drummer doesn't want to do it for 1,200, you will find 500 that will do it for 500. You know, so I'm just saying.
Pitiful.
This is an illusion. This is Hollywood. It's Hollywood up there. It's not. They don't really play music live anymore. They don't require good musicians anymore. It's, you know, the way you look is more important actually, you know, than how you actually play, because most of it is playback, you know. So, and then you have those reunion tours of people that should stay home, people that did something really great in the 70s or the 80s, and they need some money and they get back together again because they're greedy assholes. And they make boring music, which is not happening anymore, you know. Or then you have someone that was, you know, on crack for a couple of years, that was successful and had a couple of hits, and decides to come back, and cannot sing anymore, you know. And you know, people will notice it. Yeah, that's a reality, you know. Now, that's what we're up against in the business, you know. That's how I see it, you know. That's how and I'm ready to like voice that. Because I believe in rock and roll, you know. I believe in rock and roll is like pointing your finger at bullshit and go like, this is not good, you know. So I'm saying, you know, where in music did we have someone like Borat that exposes, you know, Borat is more Hendrix than anyone in music. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. That's what I'm saying. You know, we need smart people. We need leaders. We don't need people who believe everything that they read in music magazines. Oh, okay, let's do that. Well, that's what I think, you know. And what music magazines are. Yeah, that's it. They're catalogs with interviews. And some interviews are good and some of them not so good. But let's face it, you know. So I think this is not going to change unless people change it. And the change is not going to come from the top. I mean, like Obama said that, the change is coming from like the bottom. You know, it's like, you know, people walking out of this drum school, you know, standing in line to get the gig with whoever's right now famous. You know, maybe one of them will get it, and for the 20 others, what are I going to do? Yeah. You know? Go out there. Don't be a soldier. You know, be a general. You know, do what you do. Be your own boss. Create your paradigm. I think that's really the future. I would like to think so. Yeah. You know?
Jojo, I'd like to thank you for coming here, for sharing the time and sharing your very tremendous experience throughout the business and throughout your being a musician. We hope the tour ends well and the next will come up, and good luck and good work in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.